Section 3, Martin Luther and the Reformation. Objectives for this section. Understand the developments that led to the Reformation. Learn about Luther's criticism of the Church. Understand the immediate effects of Luther's ideas in Europe. Key terms: indulgence, an official pardon for a sin given by the Pope in return for money. Salvation, to go to heaven in religious terms. Reformation, the term used to describe Luther's break with the Church and the movement it inspired. The preacher was Johann Tetzel, and in return for a contribution to the Church, Tetzel said a person could receive an indulgence. An indulgence allowed the buyer to escape punishment for sins. Moreover, Tetzel said, an indulgence could be used to help a loved one who had died. In vivid language, Tetzel told of the torment of the dead as they suffered for their sins. The suffering could be avoided, Tetzel suggested, for a small sum. The granting of indulgences was not new in the Church. It had been taking place for centuries. In the early 1500s, the Church was trying to raise money for a glorious new church to be built in Rome. Tetzel was selling indulgences as part of the effort. However, attitudes toward this and other church practices were changing. For a German monk named Martin Luther, Johann Tetzel's actions went too far. Reformers tried to stop church abuses by distributing leaflets such as the one above. The Church at the time of Luther. As you have read, the Church had been in the very heart of medieval Europe life. In fact, during the medieval period, the Church had become one of the most powerful political institutions in Europe. It carried out wars and made alliances with other states. Its leader, the Pope, was a major public figure. His power was very like that of a king. Often it seemed that the Church was involved as much in the affairs of the world as in questions of faith. You have read about Erasmus and other humanist writers of the Renaissance. Many of these thinkers called attention to the changes in the Church. They observed that church leaders had in some cases lost sight of the Church's main purpose, to guide people's religious life. In the early 1500s, one of those who was dissatisfied with the Church was a monk named Martin Luther. For several years, Luther had struggled with his belief in church teachings. For example, he was troubled by the Church's belief in the importance of doing good works as a way to get in heaven. It was while Luther was struggling with these questions that Johann Tetzel began his campaign to sell indulgences. When Luther heard of Tetzel's efforts, he became angry. He decided to issue an official criticism of the Church. Reading check. How did the Church's great power lead to criticism of the Church during the Renaissance? Differences between Catholics and Protestants. This German woodcut from the Reformation visually expresses religious conflicts. Critical thinking. Note the details in the two halves of the woodcut. Which half represents Protestants and which represents Catholics? Luther starts the Reformation. In October 1517, Luther wrote a document in which he challenged the Church on the issue of indulgences. This document featured 95 theses, or arguments. Luther posted his 95 theses on the church door at Wittenberg, Germany. Church officials tried to silence Luther. Luther responded by widening his criticism of the Church. For example, he argued that people could achieve salvation through faith alone. Salvation, in religious terms, means to go to heaven. This differed from church teachings on the importance of doing good works. Luther also challenged the role of the priests. In church teachings, only a priest could perform certain church rituals. Luther wrote, "A priest is nothing else than an office holder." Luther also challenged the authority of the Pope to rule on religious matters. He said that the Bible was the only true authority. If the Pope's teachings did not follow the Bible, Luther said, people could disobey the Pope. Luther's ideas outraged church officials. They tried to force German officials to have Luther punished. Luther refused to take back what he had said and written. "Here I stand. May God help me. Amen," he said. In 1521, the Church succeeded in having Luther labeled an outlaw in Germany. However, Luther's popularity was growing, and his ideas were spreading quickly. The judgment against him was never enforced. Reading check. What did Luther say was the final authority in religious matters? The portrait above shows Martin Luther. In the illustration to the right, members of the upper class look on as Luther posts his 95 Theses. The Reformation succeeds. The Reformation is the term used to describe Luther's break with the Church and the movement it inspired. This movement continued in the 1520s. There are many reasons for the Reformation's success. After many Germans were attracted to Luther's teachings, some nobles resented the Pope and the power of Rome. They welcomed a break with the Church. The poor were encouraged by what they saw as Luther's message of equality. In the 1520s, German peasants rose in revolt. They were disappointed when Luther spoke out against them. He believed that people should respect authority in non-religious matters. Still, Lutheranism, as the movement was called, took hold in many parts of Germany. It also spread to other parts of Europe, including Sweden and Norway. In 1555, the Church of Rome finally gave in. With the Peace of Augsburg, Lutherans won the right to practice their religion. The Peace of Augsburg did not end the Reformation. In the next section, you will read about how Reformation ideas affected other parts of Europe. Reading check. Why were peasants drawn to Luther's teachings? In the painting above, German princes in 1530 present Emperor Charles V with the Augsburg Confession, in which Philip Melanchthon tried to present Lutheran theology in a form that Roman Catholics could accept. His attempt failed.